Hello and welcome back to the next round of sessions. And we start with Jürgen Bode from the University of Applied Sciences in Bonn-Rhein-Sieg, Germany, on the question of how to link the internationalization strategy and the transfer strategy, and how you do that in your institution. So, Dr. Bode, the floor is entirely yours, and I stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So I start sharing my screen. Now you should be able to see the title page of my presentation. Could you please confirm?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. So I would like to show how at our university we try to interleave the internationalization strategy with the transfer strategy. How does this connect to IHES? Well, the German model of universities of applied sciences puts in the center point the transfer between teaching research on the one hand and the society on the other hand. And I would like to reflect how this impacts internationalization strategies. Let me briefly introduce my university. Wait a minute. Yes. So the Universities of Applied Sciences, they have started operation in Germany in the 1970s. As a practice-oriented complement to the traditional research universities. So the focus is on application orientation of teaching and research. It is on employability of our graduates. As I said in the beginning, transfer, the third mission, plays an important role. We don't do basic research. We only do research with clear links to applications. And historically, and I'm talking about the 1900s, maybe until the year 2000, the focus of our type of universities was on teaching and not so much on research. But this is dramatically changing now as more and more stakeholders in society and in politics understand that also universities of applied sciences need a balance of all three missions: teaching, research, and transfer. And this change is maybe most obviously reflected in the establishment of PhD programs at universities of applied sciences, and also the legislation that step by step allows in more and more directions University of Applied Sciences to award PhD degrees. So research also plays an increasing role among University of Applied Sciences. My university has approximately 10,000 students with study programs in engineering, computer science, management science, applied natural sciences, and social security sciences. So it's a bit typical for University of Applied Sciences. Humanities are uncommon for this type of universities because they're naturally not very transfer oriented. So here you can see that how the university accomplishes transfer with the environment, with society. And when I talk about society, I would split this up into companies on the one hand, which I regard as part of society, and non-profits and other societal stakeholders on the other hand. And how is this transfer orientation, how is this application orientation ensured and accomplished at our type of universities? Well, number one, the professors, they must have practical experience. I always repeat saying that even if a Nobel laureate applies on a professorship for our university, which never happened in the past, we were not allowed to hire these people unless they have practical experience. On the student side, internships are a must. Our teaching is practice-oriented, and due to the fact that our professors have practical experience, this is easy to do. Our research is application-oriented. We collaborate with non-academic partners in teaching and research, and also thesis writing is heavily supported for students who work as interns at non-academic institutions and write their thesis before the background of a practice-oriented project in society, in companies, or in other societal stakeholders. So historically, the transfer of our type of universities has concentrated on companies, also because the study programs that are historically established at our type of universities is closely connected to what is in demand by companies. But I'm questioning if it is useful to make a distinction between companies and other societal stakeholders. I believe higher education for society should also embrace companies. Companies play an important role in society. Companies' job is to distribute resources and to distribute products into the society among consumers to fulfill demand. And so there is, for our purpose, no reason to make a distinction. Plus, because universities of applied sciences have more than 50 years experience in collaborating with companies, we can learn from the processes and the methods applied there to transfer this also to society at large, so also to nonprofits and other societal stakeholders. Let's have a look at internationalization. If we look at the typical internationalization measures at universities of applied sciences, you see a lot of familiar terms: student exchange, double degree programs, international research teams, and so on, through to internationalization at home. So where is the difference? Where is the difference through traditional research-oriented universities? And I have to admit, when you see this list, there is not much difference. The internationalization at universities of applied sciences, by and large, follows the example of traditional universities. We don't see much the distinct profile of universities of applied sciences being reflected in the internationalization measures. And this is also supported by the president of DAAD, Professor Mukherjee, who also states that there is not yet a conceptual approach available that links internationalization with activities in the society, or with transfer, as we call it. So we are now in the process of developing a new strategy valid in the years 2021 to 2025. And one important element of this new internationalization strategy is interleaving our internationalization strategy with our transfer strategy, thus making our internationalization strategy rest on the specific profile on this type of University of Applied Sciences. So how could this be accomplished? So for instance, we can do the internships abroad. We can do the thesis writing abroad. So we can send students to companies and other organizations abroad and do the very same thing that they have been doing in the past with companies and institutions in our region. We can find foreign partners to do transfer cooperation in the field of research. Yeah? So we can do joint research with foreign partners. We, as many other universities of applied sciences, we have a special focus also on entrepreneurship and startup development. We have an own incubation center on our campus, and we can invite foreign startups for this incubation and integrate them into our activities to connect our students and our faculty with the startups in the incubation center. But we can also develop our own startups and not only incubate them in our own center, but cooperate with incubation centers abroad. We are currently in discussion with incubation centers in South China, in the region of Shenzhen, which is a big hub of startup development. And we want to motivate our startups that have been growing from the middle of our university to also take China into account and use these incubation centers. We have established a project that allows our international graduates to find jobs in the region. So by this, we catch two flies with one hit, because we help our international graduates to find jobs easier and better. And on the other hand, we help our corporate partners in the region to solve their problem of finding new employees. We want to run localization projects for foreign companies. For instance, a company that is considering entering the German market, we can have students in a seminar, in a practice-oriented project seminar, do market research for this company, or to adapt the foreign products such that they fulfill the demand in the German market. But also for those students who do not wish to travel, we have offers like internships and thesis writing with international companies in the region. We have quite a number of international companies here, and their management is international. So our students can acquire international capabilities in the region where they live by working for an international company. Also, we have regional companies, especially the so-called German Mittelstand, small and medium-sized enterprises, who are not yet too much international, but they are seeking support for their internationalization endeavors. And we as a university, in our mission to do transfer, we can support these regional companies in their internationalization efforts. We call this regional internationalization, and we can also involve students in that. And finally, we can set up summer schools and involve international companies in these summer schools. All these activities are a materialization of our interleaving strategy between internationalization and transfer. And another element which I would like to highlight is that we also want to establish in our new strategy what we call low threshold internationalization. Why that? Because when we look at the traditional methods of internationalization, for instance, an exchange semester abroad, it is only roughly 10% of our students who take this opportunity. So 90% of our students, they are physically not mobile, and they fail to enjoy the benefits of our internationalization programs. And so we have come to the conclusion that, that we have to offer more products and services in internationalization that represent a lower threshold for our students so that they can internationalize without the big effort of those students who would go, for instance, to an exchange semester abroad. So you might know the term structure follows strategy. So now that we will develop this new strategy and it will come into place next year, we have to make sure that we can implement this strategy. And an important element of strategy implementation is organization. So we have to adapt our organization so that it is able to implement the strategy. But what are the challenges? Well, if I look at the two main organizational units who would be in charge of implementing interleaving internationalization strategy and transfer strategy, the first one that comes into mind is the International Office. But the International Office, at least in our case, has no experience in connecting to the corporate world, neither in the region nor abroad. And the staff in the International Office, they are enthusiasts of international academic exchange, but they do not speak the corporate language. And it is very difficult to create a connection between companies and the International Office and come to a productive exchange, because International Office does not quite understand what is beneficial for the companies, and the companies do not quite understand what is the aim of the International Office. On the other hand, we have a transfer office who exactly is in charge of maintaining the network to our societal environment. Their focus, however, is largely on regional companies. Yeah? So they deal a lot with regional companies, and we might use this strength of our transfer office to connect to international regional companies, so international companies who are settled in our region. But up to now, this special link to international companies in the region has not systematically been exploited yet. And the staff in the transfer office regards the international perspective as marginal. They see their main job connecting to any company in the region. And we can even be happy if staff in the transfer office speaks English on a high enough level to really be involved in our internationalization strategy. So my conclusion is, it is a lot easier to write an interleaving strategy than to create an interleaving organization. And I think this is, well, the provocative statement with which I would like to conclude my presentation. And I would be happy to welcome you for your inputs, how you would help us, or how you would implement such an interleaving strategy and make it a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jürgen Bode. Just from my side, it's enthusing to see that you picked up exactly key aspects, which we also discussed this morning and highlighted in the study. One is the disconnect. We talked about the disconnect mainly between the International Office and the office in charge of social engagement as such. But if you could go on your the second last slide, because that was so enlightening. The second last one. Yeah, this one, which is, it is so much easier. Could you click once more? Yeah, perfect. That is exactly what I wanted to leave there. What you showed is another disconnect we see in the university, where you have competences in two different offices, right? In the international office and in the transfer office, which would be beneficial to the other office, because the international office would benefit from the transfer experience, which is there, and the transfer office would strongly also benefit from having some training or something by the international office, or use their language skills or something. So there is a disconnect. So indeed, it is writing a strategy is probably always the easiest thing, but to generate the mindset change, I think that is the big challenge. And I just, as soon as somebody from the audience will pose a question, I will immediately, of course, withdraw myself from discussing with you. But I find it very, very interesting, because I was thinking, do you have established now some kind of, let's say, maybe regular meetings already between the two offices to exchange knowledge?
Not yet, not yet. This would be one of the first steps in implementing the new strategy. We want to set up something like, we call it a core team it's something like a board of whose task is to implement the new internationalization strategy. And in this board, and that is the new thing, the transfer office will also be represented, and not only the international office. So that the transfer office feels that they also have a responsibility in implementing the internationalization strategy.
I think that is a splendid thing. If you want, I could play the one who asked the questions to you, because now we have them coming in from the audience, both at the same time. So I just take it from the top. Audrey Stolze asks, what about the role of digitization on internationalization as a low threshold strategy? Your future strategy is still based on physical exchanges.
Thank you very much, Audrey. And we are perfectly aware of this this issue, and of course we have the digital internationalization strategy plays a very big role with us, and it is simply that I listed only a few examples, that I was not able to also list our digital offers to the students. But yes, of course, this is a low threshold strategy, and it's very important to us. Thank you.
The next question comes from Auti Niemensivu from Finland, and she asks a provocative question. Mm-hmm. Could you not, I add now simply, could you merge the international office and the transfer office? The question is not as provocative in the German setting as you might think, right? Because we've seen a lot of merging events between student offices, international offices, and these alike. But could you merge the international office and the transfer office? And if I could add, would that solve the problem?
Mm-hmm. I would not recommend that. I was, in my talk, I said they speak different languages. And I think to a certain extent, it is necessary that they speak different languages. We need specialists who understand the corporate language, and we need specialists who understand the international academic language. And I think it will be, it will not help when you merge the two. I think instead of merging, you should rather install procedures where they more talk with each other. So what I could imagine is that in the transfer office, I would establish a person responsible for the international, and there would be a dotted line relationship to the international office. So that person would be in sort of a matrix organization, would have two bosses. One is the boss of the transfer office, and the other boss is the boss of the international office. And that person could either work in the transfer office or in the international office and deal with this overlap of society and internationalization.
And you would pay for the therapy sessions for this person to deal with the with the conflicting loyalties.
Of course, this requires that the two organizations work well with each other, and especially the two bosses of these two units, they have a good collegial working relationship with each other. And that's, of course, my task as the vice president of the university to ensure this.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the side, something that I found really useful, which my former vice president international at Humboldt University many years back, Dr. Barbara Ischinger, formerly diplomat and these things, what she did was that she went to each dean once a semester with me and sat down and asked, what is it that you bother about? And not about internationalization. And they talked about all kinds of things. And then we went out, and I was a lot younger back then. And she said, Uwe, now you sit down and think what his problems or her problems are and where you can find some solution through internationalization. And I was thinking it could be really helpful if these two offices maybe sometimes sit down and just talk about their own problems, and the other office can think how we can help the other one. Mm-hmm. It's just an idea. Mm-hmm. But we also have a nice other aspect here from Gabriele Abermann from Salzburg. Very interesting perspective on existing structures. To what extent will human resources also be involved for professional development and recruitment in the future? I assume that is mainly related to academic staff then, of course.
So do I understand correctly that it is meant that how does academic staff become developed more towards the corporate world and the non-academic world?
The disadvantage of a Q&A tool is that I cannot answer for her, but I would also assume that. By the way, we also have other questions coming up, and the advantage for the attendees is that Dr. Bode can answer these questions also in typing during the next session already, because he will stay on as a panelist during the next session to have this opportunity to answer. So, but for the first one, how would you, under that assumption, how would you answer that?
Yes, this is also a very good point that, for instance, in our personnel development initiatives, we would allow the international office to obtain experience with companies. That's a very good point, so that the staff starts to speak the corporate language. Interesting point. We have not thought about it yet. In the other way around, people from the transfer office to send, for instance, to a staff exchange to other universities abroad. This is quite common, and we have quite some interest in the personnel of the transfer office. But I like the idea of sending staff of the international office to the corporate world for a 1 or 2 week staff exchange, as we know it from the academic world. Great idea.
Thank you. So there is another one, which is quick, which you can maybe answer before we stop here. And that is, can the career office be a bridge between those two offices?
Yes, very good. And we are doing this. You might remember I said that our international graduates, we help them in our career office to find a job with regional companies. And there already we have this link. And this is a very good point where we can, as a starting point, to increase the exchange between international office and transfer office. Yes.
Thank you very much. I would say that I leave the other two questions for you to answer. Let's see. We can maybe squeeze in another one, and that is, let's take the one from Sandra Lotti. We have an international roadmap connected to our overall strategy. It has been developed by a steering group. It consists of 8 members, and so this is more a kind of a comment. I would just simply say, I post the comment so that everybody else can see it. It's less of a question. And we have one more from Alejandra Gonzalez. Have you tried to identify interesting cases led by academic units or particularly faculty members that could be supported by the central units of the university?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a very good point. And it shows that Alejandra apparently is very experienced in university management, because this is a typical method how to implement new innovative strategies in university by simply picking an example from one faculty and making this a showcase for all the others, and asking them to mimic that or to mirror that in their own faculty. So thank you. This is also an interesting point to make, and a very good method, especially for academic institutions, to implement new strategies.
I muted myself again. I think with that, we would stop this part. And I thank you very much for your exciting presentation, because I think it really fits very well, and it shows another dimension of IHAS that can be used. And I would like to just encourage other institutions as well to look at these ways, particularly when you are more engaged with the practical side. So not only academic research and teaching, but also academic and practical research and teaching. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you for the opportunity.